There we go. Can you guys see me and hear me okay? I'm not ever sure what's going on with this computer. But so, welcome to episode 97 of Accents from Trial, 3 away from 100. We'll be back probably on Monday with uh, more philosophy content. Um, been dealing with some things, uh, both myself and Mike have been trying to take care of, so it's been hard to sit down and find the time to come out with content. But um, definitely, there's more new things in the near future. Um, but for now, one thing that this is gonna be a lot of rambling. Uh, let you guys know from the start. I'm still kind of trying to process all the things I want to say. Um, one thing that I've been thinking about is how sometimes, like once in a while, I want to step out of the typical kind of content that we come out with and give you a little bit of an insight into my own life, and maybe because I have the privilege of having this kind of platform of sharing with you guys some of the lessons that I've learned or am learning about how to navigate life in general or relationships or any kind of detail that I might find useful, and hopefully that might be of some service to somebody out there listening. Maybe. I'm not saying that my advice will necessarily apply to everybody, um, but nevertheless, there are things that I've been thinking about that might be useful for somebody. And I guess one thing I want to say is, in case anybody listening uh, now or in the future is anybody that I've dated or an ex or whatever may be the case, this is not about you. This is not about anybody in specific, although I might refer to certain situations that you may have been involved in. This is more, the point of this is not certainly not to call anybody out. It's more of a general perspective of what it is that I'm learning as I grow older about love and relationships and healthy and unhealthy dynamics and all of that kind of thing. Um, so, and obviously, if you guys have any questions or feedback, just let me know in the comments. But the one thing that I keep coming back to over and over again um, is this idea that it's important for anybody to take responsibility for your own mental health. Now, it's also say that uh, no, it is not about you, but you are lovely. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, so to take responsibility of your own mental health. Um, not to say that your partner shouldn't be supportive of whatever you're going through and be helpful there. Obviously, they should be. Um, but I think it's ultimately your responsibility to make sure that you are working on yourself to be the best possible person you can be. Um, and one thing that I've noticed in myself, and this is a problem in me, is this pattern that's been true for almost every relationship that I've found myself in. Not all of them, but almost all of them, where I have sought out people that were fundamentally broken in one way or another, whether it was physically or mentally, emotionally, all the above. There was some fundamental, um, deep-seated issue there. And I think part of that is because I have this kind of inherent desire to want to not just help, but fix, which I think is kind of a gross thing that I don't like about myself. Um, and kind of this desire of wanting to feel needed, which I think is problematic because you should want to be with someone who wants you there, but who doesn't need you there. Because when they need you there, I think that creates very easily a sick codependence that, if unchecked, can become very toxic. When they want you there, it means that you can work together, but that they're also still a whole person on their own. And when they have the stability in themselves, your relationship is also more likely to flourish and not spiral. That's not to say, I don't buy into the idea that we have to necessarily love ourselves to be with somebody or have all our issues fixed. I mean, that's delusional. Everybody is going to have some things they're going to be dealing with for the rest of their life, probably. But it's stable enough that one can avoid certain toxic patterns, or at least recognize those patterns and put in the work to navigate those things and make those things better. One situation that I found myself in at one point in my life was with somebody who, because of how they grew up, even though they wanted certain kind of stability and a certain kind of trust, and wanted to be around somebody that could, what's the word I'm thinking of, could be dependable, they were so afraid of commitment. They were so afraid of things being too good to be true, or them not being worthy enough, or just the anxiety of being responsible, not just for yourself, but in some ways for another person, as far as like how their actions might affect other people. And all those things that they just couldn't navigate the relationship. And ultimately, you can objectively be the best possible person and best possible partner for that person. Like, you can be willing to put up with things that other people might not have been willing to put up with, or you could be a good listener or supportive or caring, or you could check off every box that they might seek in a partner. But if they're not ready to commit, none of that is going to matter. Now, I think people that are avoidant or have a fear of commitment, this idea that you're going to get over that sitting on in your room by yourself, as opposed to facing your fears, facing yourself, and dealing with the anxiety that you might initially feel in a relationship. To get over commitment, you have to put yourself in a position where you're committed and deal with that. Right? Yeah. I have a need for reassurance. So do I. I have a terrible need for reassurance. In many ways, I'm very insecure over things that I've been through. Yes, therapy is good, but there's also a lot of bad therapists out there. Some of the people that were the most problematic in my life, who I tried to date, were people who were in therapy, and yet we're not using therapy to the best of their capacity. If you're just using your therapist as someone to vent to, as opposed to figure out what dynamics I'm struggling with, a lot of people exist but are too afraid to live, and that's the thing. I mean, one thing that I'll never forget is one specific person had this idea that relationships were too hard and too draining and too painful, and they had to focus on not losing their job, as though like a relationship has to be this draining thing, instead of thinking, let me seek out a professional, let me figure out a way to navigate these anxieties so I can actually keep the love that I have said that I want. One other thing that I think is problematic, or can be problematic, is, and I know this is going to be difficult for some people to hear, and And I want to be very careful to state that I'm not judging any person's lifestyle, but I do have thoughts about it. And it's this idea of polyamory. I think that there are people with which certain polyamorous dynamics can actually benefit and strengthen your relationship with your primary partner. In fact, I had a guest on somebody a few episodes ago who's polyamorous, who I respect very much, and I think it seems to work for her, and I think that's great. But then there's a lot of people who kind of go the polyamorous way, not because it's necessarily the dynamic that would make them the happiest, because they're too afraid to actually face their fears of commitment. So instead of dealing with that, they want to leave their options open, or they want to kind of, I know it's possible for people to have sex without love. I can't really do that. And I think in some way, when you have intimacy, it's so much more beautiful to me that I can't wrap my head around even bothering to have sex with somebody that I didn't love, because I would feel like I was wasting my time. But not everybody's like that, and that's fine. And that's fine. Like I'm not saying that there's necessarily a right or a wrong way, but I think it depends on the motivations. And I think when people use sex to get people to like them, or use sex because it's actually as a way to diminish intimacy, it can be a problem. And I'm trying to think of how to verbalize this. Again, I think there are certain dynamics that can make your relationship with your primary partner better when you open up a relationship. The dynamic that I can't really understand is dating people separately as opposed to sharing a thing together, whether it's another partner or specific sexual partners. Because to me, like, I can live with a roommate. I can make happy memories with friends. But I can't do those things. I can own a house with a friend, right? But if I'm sleeping with somebody, if there is that sexual component to them, and there's that intimate component to them, I'm not okay with that being shared with other people without me there. Because at that point, I would feel like I'm just a roommate that person has sex with. Now, you wrote, would you identify as demisexual, the need for an emotional connection before you feel the physical desire? I'm somewhere in between. Like, I have felt physical desire before really knowing people very well. But I'm more on the demisexual side. Like, I think that for me, especially to feel comfortable with intimacy and to feel fulfilled by intimacy, I need that emotional connection, I need that intellectual connection as well, if not more so. That's not to say that I can't be attracted to somebody without knowing them very well. I think there are exceptions. I'm not strictly demisexual, but I'm definitely demisexual leaning. Another example. We all make mistakes. We all sometimes fail to be what we want to be. And I'm not saying that if somebody makes a mistake or they might lie to you or something, that should be the end of the relationship. But trust is a fundamental aspect to the success of a relationship. And, it's not so much about the singular mistake, but it's about a mindset. And if one's mindset is one that operates in fear or operates in trying to find the easy way out or avoiding commitment or avoiding your problems or avoiding growth, a lot of people say they want to grow. A lot of people say they want to challenge themselves. But when it comes down to action, it's not something that I've observed actually happens a lot. A lot of people are just talk and not a lot of action. And so I've been in situations where, I really cared about somebody, but when certain promises were broken to me, I wasn't able to recover from that. And that is a big thing. Someone's word is, to me, means a lot, because I don't break promises, and it doesn't mean that I expect the rest of humanity to be able to do that, or to be as stubborn in not sometimes taking the easy way out. Again, it's a matter of mindset. It's a matter of how often, and it's a matter of how one processes trauma and difficult feelings and all those things. And what I take responsibility in kind of the failures of my relationships is, again, like kind of what I was saying earlier, ignoring red flags or being drawn to people that were fundamentally not ready or capable of healthy boundaries or healthy dynamics. And also myself not having the boundaries that I needed. Allowing myself to bend backwards for people as opposed to taking care of my own needs. That's something that I've struggled with. I remember a situation where this was when I was very young, and I met somebody who was suffering from a number of disorders, including an eating disorder. And I tried so hard to help him through it. Eventually, the relationship was so toxic. It was such terrible push and pull of I love you, I hate you every other day, that I couldn't handle the situation anymore. But then for the next however number of years, we would occasionally reconnect and talk again. And this was over the course of, I think, a decade. And it wasn't always in a romantic context. Sometimes it was just as friends because we were dating other people, whatever. But there was always this kind of return to something that was fundamentally toxic. And eventually this person convinced me to go visit them. Now, we had met once in person. This is someone that I met online, and then we hadn't really met again in person again for a number of years. And I went to meet them again. We were together for about, I was there for about a couple of weeks. It was a really amazing time. We had made plans of moving in together and all those things. But all of the same fundamental issues that had plagued our relationship from the beginning were still there, just kind of lessened. There was some progress made there, but fundamentally they were still the same broken person. In fact, when I left, took less than a month for things to completely spiral and for them to get back with their ex that they had previously been talking to me behind their back, which is another red flag. Like, I shouldn't have been involved in a situation like that to begin with. And I think the thing that disturbed me there was that they were kind of trying to use their mental health as a reason to take space. And then in kind of prodding that conversation, I realized that, oh no, they actually went behind my back and got with their ex again. But there's only so much I can blame other people, right? When I start to realize that this is a pattern that I find myself in, a pattern of ignoring red flags and putting myself in situations that are ultimately bound to fail. And a lot of my relationships have gone two ways. Either long-term relationships where they don't start out particularly passionate. It's more like a slower progress, but there's a sense of there's something missing there. Or I meet somebody and it is fireworks from day one, and I become like almost obsessive in some ways, and I kind of fall into a codependency, and those situations are so highly emotional that it triggers me into a manic state. Now, I don't know if I'm bipolar or whatever. I know I'm not being diagnosed, although a close friend of mine who's a therapist thinks I am. I know that I've had manic episodes, and usually what's triggered them has been toxic relationships with women. And so it's, I'm trying to figure out and trying to be how to become more self-aware, and how not to just recognize the red flags, because I've learned pretty well how to do that, but to also react to those red flags and make better choices for myself. So instead of saying, okay, that's a red flag, but screw it, I'm just going to pursue this anyway, to actually stick to my standards and stick to what I know that I want in a relationship. And if there's one message that I want to get across to anybody listening, is know your own worth and don't compromise your values for somebody else. To a degree, relationships are about compromise. They're also about embracing, not just accepting, but embracing another person for their otherness, but not in the context of enabling self-destruction or enabling abusive behavior or enabling toxicity. It's okay to to disagree with somebody on something. Again, and it's something that I've learned recently. Like, I don't want to just accept certain things that might make me uncomfortable, but I want to learn how to embrace somebody for their otherness. But there are limits, and there's a context there. And so, on one hand, be open and be able to also allow yourself to be challenged by the other person, but also don't give up your core values, and don't put yourself in a situation where you allow yourself to be used or abused or taken for granted or not respected or not loved in the way that you deserve. And these are some of the things that I'm slowly figuring out. I think it's hard when you kind of have rose-colored glasses and you meet somebody that you connect with, and you meet somebody that you really love, and you are excited for the future, and you have all these plans, and you have all these ideas of things you want to share with a person. And then for that to implode or fall apart, or not having the person reciprocate those feelings, or maybe they might like you that much, but are too incapable of engaging on the level because they're too afraid of life. You have to know when to fight for something, and you have to know when to walk away from something. And I think that I struggle with boundaries as far as accepting when to walk away from something, and allowing people to take advantage of the fact that I have a lot of love to give, and I am a good listener, and I try to work through things, even things that would send most people running away. I don't know. I think it's hard. And if anybody wants to add anything, I don't know how long I'm going to do the stream for. I don't think I've even hit a half hour yet, but I also don't want to become repetitive. I think it's just, it takes a willingness to live, and this is not even just about relationships, but it's about what you're going to make out of your life. If you're not willing to put in the work, you're only going to get so far. You only get out of life what you put into it, I think. And it's easy to come up with 1,000 reasons why it's too hard to focus on one problem because there are so many other ones. Most of the time, I feel that most of the people's problems, there might be 20 different things that they're struggling with, but they're all symptomatic of the same fundamental issues. In one case, it might be fear of commitment, or fear of failure, which might turn into fear of commitment, or fear of things being too serious, or fear of having to care about how your actions affect others. A lot of people are just afraid to live. They're afraid of intimacy. They're afraid of being vulnerable. They're afraid of putting themselves out there and failing. Fear of abandonment. I mean, I have a lot of that fear. Some people have a fear of abandonment in a way that makes them avoidant. It makes them kind of destroy a relationship before it begins. Other people, more like myself, have a fear of abandonment in a way that makes them codependent, makes them too needy, makes them maybe too suffocating in the need for constant reassurance. I think the worst too is when you have two people with different kind of personality types try to get together. Like if you have an anxious kind of attachment style and somebody else has more of like an avoidance style, that's a recipe for disaster. Because one is going to start pulling away, which is going to make you start reaching out more, which is going to make them pull away more, which is going to make you reach out more. It's just a cycle of shit. And yeah, right. It really hurts when you keep putting yourself out there and you're constantly getting shut down. Yeah, it does. And it's extremely frustrating when you hear from people, whether it's men or women, or people of different gender identities, that what they want is a good listener, good support, someone who can see them, someone willing to put in the effort, someone who is reliable. Like you fit all these boxes, and yet it's not good enough because they're scared of it. Or they might think it's too good to be true. And instead of choosing what might actually be the best for them, they would rather seek emotionally unavailable people so that they can continue the cycle of themselves getting hurt and then kind of reaffirming the idea that they're always going to be alone, or that they're not worth being loved. Or yes, communication is key, but sometimes communication is not enough either, because I can think of a number of situations where my communication with the person was quite open and clear, but I could have said what I said a million different ways, and they could even understand that I was right, and they might even agree with my assessment of my psychology and their psychology, and what could make it better and what might not make it better. But again, if they're not willing to put in that work, if they're not willing to choose love as opposed to fear, none of it is going to matter. Yeah, and the one situation I'm specifically thinking of, the communication was clear. It just, they didn't know what they wanted. And one minute they were saying that I don't know what I want, and the next minute they would get angry at me because they felt like I was telling them what they should want. That's the other thing. It's sometimes I think I can come off as condescending or like I'm lecturing, when it's like, no, these are things that you yourself have said to me, and I'm just kind of reflecting your words back at you so you can be more. A lot of people are not self-aware, but you can show them that you're right, or you can show them all the evidence you want. None of that matters ultimately when it comes to love and what you feel. Like, if you're scared of pursuing something, even if it's right for you, you're not going to pursue it. And that's on my end. That's when I have to understand that, like, I could have all the dreams I want about what that situation could have been, and all the belief I want about how good I could be for that person or how good they could be for me. None of it is relevant, because it's not never going to turn into that reality, even if it has a potential to. And that's when, I have to learn how to set my own boundaries and walk away from that, and protect myself. And so, yeah, I guess I would say set boundaries, know your worth, compromise to a degree, embrace to a degree, stay true to yourself throughout all of that as well, and make sure that the people that you're trying to develop a relationship with are willing to not just exist, but are willing to live and are willing to put in the necessary work to better themselves in this life. Because the people that say it's too hard, or they can't do it now, or they have a list of excuses, are the people that are going to live their life miserable, are the people that are going to end up alone or in toxic relationships or going into the same fucking cycles of toxicity and depression. And ultimately, life is hard. I know life is hard, and many times in my life I have not wanted to put in the work necessary to get through whatever period of suffering I was going through, or discomfort that something might make me feel. But you have to do what you have to do. That's what it comes down to. Either you do what you need to do, or you stay stuck in the same place. And I think this might be a too simplistic way of dividing it, but I think there's two kinds of people in the world. There's those that are willing to put in the work, and those that are not. Those that are willing to fight to be the best person they can be, and those that are willing to take the easy way out and hide their head in the sand and ignore their problems and seek out drugs or seek out alcohol or seek out toxic relationships, because it's easier to distract yourself from yourself than to actually allow yourself to grow. Yes, the hardest thing in the world is to live in it, for sure. Especially when you don't get the results right away. Like, it is a long term. The fruits of that process are not immediate, and we're so used to sort of the what's what I'm thinking of, kind of the automatic. What's the word I'm thinking of? The instant gratification. And actually, that kind of reminds me of something else I want to say about polyamory as well. I think I understand the idea that nobody can fulfill your every need, but if you're not at peace in yourself, and your partner can fulfill your needs, and your friendships and your family can fulfill the other needs, to some degree, I think there's kind of selfishness there. Like, and unreasonable expectations, that you're wanting too much in certain cases, at least in the cases where it leads you to not be able to have any deep, stable connections with at least a primary partner. I'm just of the opinion that, again, and I don't want to be misunderstood. Like, I would never define somebody's self-worth by how many people they've slept with, or how they've slept with them, or how they view sex. Like, that is irrelevant to how worthy they are as a human being. So I don't judge them morally on that level. But I do think that if one is diminishing sex to purely just a physical activity, that most often, not everybody, but most often, that is actually a kind of self-destruction. Again, depends on the person. But from what I understand about psychology, it's hard for me to necessarily take somebody at their word when their views on sex have led them to be used by people, or led them to never experience intimacy. Or once they've experienced that intimacy, being afraid of it and being so quick to return to something that feels less serious or feels less deep, because that depth can be terrifying for somebody who's afraid of commitment. So I would say that for now, that's probably my rant on these things. There's a part of me that, having gone through enough heartbreak and disappointment in romantic relationships, it's easy to kind of think, fuck this, like, I'm not going to put myself out there anymore. Or if you've lost somebody that you love deeply, it hurts too much to potentially risk going through that again. And kind of having a nihilistic view of it. And I'm going through some of that right now, because I have been very badly hurt in a number of ways in the last year. But I keep coming back to this idea that a life without love is not really a life. And it's okay in the moment to take time to yourself. You shouldn't dive from relationship to relationship. It's important that you take time to heal and to be able to be okay on your own. But yeah, a life without connection, a life without love, I don't think is a life for me worth living. I personally think that there is a beauty in exclusivity, that there should be something exclusive about your relationship with your partner. And that exclusivity, I think, usually is sexual for me. Like I said, I'm not opposed to all open dynamics, but just one in which we can all go do whatever we want without the other partner there, that to me wouldn't feel like a relationship. And I can't comprehend how some people do, although I think some people are genuine in being able to do that. I'm not trying to project my own limitations onto the rest of the world. But I do think that most people who follow that are not genuine. I think most people who follow that are terrified of commitment and would rather not face the fear. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Say it again. I think a life without love is not worth living. And it's easy to be bitter in the moment. It's easy to be hurt and find it difficult to put yourself out there. but I don't want to be somebody who lives with walls around me. And if I'm too intense for somebody, if I'm too passionate for somebody, and that person rejects me, we're not compatible. And sometimes things don't work not because there's something wrong with you, but because it just wasn't the right dynamic. Or sometimes it is because there's something wrong with you, and you have to put in the work to be the partner that you need to be for the thing to not be toxic. Or sometimes it's a combination of both. I don't know. Does anybody have any other comments? Yeah, if you're too much, they can go find less. I think that's something that I'm trying to, a way that I'm trying to live by. I mean, I think it's easy to kind of fall into the mindset of, I'm never going to find somebody because, especially in the beginning, if I really like someone, I feel things so intensely, and that can be overwhelming. And I can, like I said, I can go manic, and I can kind of lose my mind a little bit. And that's not a good thing necessarily. I think there's a line between passion being a beautiful thing, but that turning into an unhealthy and toxic obsession that can be a negative thing. So there's a fine line with all these things, and there are right and wrong ways to navigate those things. But ultimately, you got to know when something is worth fighting for, when something, even if you think it's beautiful and could have been the best thing ever, you got to recognize reality for what it is, and know when to walk away. And it's hard. I think the hardest thing sometimes to do is to walk away, especially when you're afraid of being alone, or when you're so attached to somebody that you just wish, if I could just say the right thing or do the right thing, it could make them see my way. You can't make anybody do anything. You can't make them. You should never debate somebody into being with you, or try to reason somebody into being with you. If they're not willing to see reality for what it is, it's time to let that person go. And maybe they'll come back around once they face themselves, or maybe they'll never face themselves, and they'll live the rest of their life in a way that harms them. But you can only do so much. So I hope that rant wasn't too much of a mess. But it's just, I felt compelled to talk about some of these things, because a lot of thoughts that I've been having about not just recent things, but my life in general, like the patterns that I've noticed in my relationships, and the unhealthy patterns that I've contributed to, and that I need to take responsibility for and grow from, so that I can learn to avoid making the same mistakes and making better choices for myself. Because ultimately, I'm also part of that equation. Like, if my relationships are failing, and they're failing for similar reasons, well, I am part of that. There's something that I'm doing wrong. There's certain types of people that I'm attracting, that I'm engaging with, that I shouldn't be engaging with from the start. And yeah, so I don't know. I hope that anybody listening to this might take something useful out of it. But I don't really know. Unless somebody has anything else to add or to ask, I might probably just end the stream. I don't think I've even got an hour, but I think I've run out of stuff to say, honestly. And if I have any other thoughts in the future about this, I'm sure I will. But I appreciate anybody who takes the time to listen to my thoughts and to engage in the kind of work we're trying to put out there and the kind of content we're putting out there. Anybody who supports what we're doing, whether it's by patreon.com/Axiom on Trial, or just by liking, subscribing, or leaving comments, or engaging in the chat. I love all of you, and I know that sometimes we go through times we're not putting content as consistently as I would like, but we'll continue to improve on that and everything. So thank you. I appreciate the support and all the comments from everybody. And I hope that everybody has a great rest of your weekend. And we should be back with episode 98, I think, on Monday. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again, and I will see you guys next time.